Hello, my name is Sheila and I would like to welcome you to my podcast All About You. I love to listen to podcasts and especially conversations with famous people. However, I think everyone has a story to tell. Maybe a place you have visited, a hobby you enjoy, or anything that you feel would be of interest. I want to have conversations with lots of different people and hear their stories. So if you have a story to tell, please contact me on my email allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com. Welcome to the All About You podcast. I have a question for you. Have you ever taken one of the famous London black cabs? If so, did the driver know where you wanted to go? You may have heard about the knowledge. This is the training and the exam which is said to be the hardest exam in the world. All London black cab drivers have to undertake the knowledge to obtain their licence, and this is one of the things we are talking about today with my guest David Stiles. David was a London cabbie for over 25 years and has written about London on cabbieblog.com since June 2008, which has been read by over 1.3 million people. He was also the features editor at Radio Taxis and has contributed to Time Out, Metro, Evening Standard and the Mail Online, National Geographic, and The Spirit of London, a book presented to Her Majesty the Queen and given to all athletes competing in the 2012 London Olympics. He has also appeared in the BBC documentary A Picture of London. Although not active on social media, he now has over 4,000 followers. Now retired, it gives him time to concentrate on bringing his love of London to a wider public. So today I'm delighted to have David as my guest. So David, welcome to the All About You podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
David, I am so excited about this conversation. So I remember seeing a programme all about London black cabbies having to take this exam called the Knowledge. And I was just blown away about this exam. So I'm delighted to have you with me today and let's talk about the Knowledge. So when did you decide you wanted to be a London black cabbie?
About 1991, I'd had a succession of redundancies. Originally, I was a printer, a typesetter, and as the industry started to change, I was made redundant a couple of times, and I decided really I was getting too old to be made redundant again. So I undertook the Knowledge, little realising just what it entailed. I think anyone who thinks of doing the Knowledge doesn't realise what's involved, but that's another story.
So how did it all start then, this journey onto the Knowledge? You went along to the London Black Tabby School and had an interview. Was that the start of the process?
You apply to what now is Transport for London. Before it was run by the police and it's called the Carriage Office. But now it's run by Transport for London. You apply. You have a medical and you have a check on your criminal record. And if all things are okay, then they send you this little booklet and it's called the Blue Book. Though it's pink in each cover. And in that, you've got a number of runs. Now, when I did the Knowledge, there were 468 runs. Nowadays, there's 320 runs. So that they are just a simple grid across the whole of London. So if you think of London and you think of getting from A to B, somewhere along that line, you're going to go along that grid. So that's the grid we all have to undertake for a starter. So that's the very beginning. So once you go on the Knowledge, you get this book and you're expected to go out and learn all these runs. And then you start having what we call appearances. So there are 2 or 3 words we have to learn right from the very beginning. The first is runs, as I've just described. Appearances are your exams, which are a one-to-one verbal exam with an examiner in his office. And the other word we have to remember is the word points, which can be anything you could find along those runs, i.e. restaurants, cinemas, meeting halls, blue plaques, even anything can be a point. And those you have to then find and then try to remember them all. So we've got now we've got 320 runs, and we've probably got something like 20,000 points, roughly. So that's the start of it.
I mean, that's just blowing my mind straight away. Although you're doing the knowledge, you're not actually being paid at this time because you haven't passed the knowledge and got your driver's license. So a lot of people are still doing their full-time job as well as learning the knowledge. And on this particular TV program, it showed somebody doing the knowledge, and basically they were on their push bike. They had the map strapped to the handlebars, and they were literally cycling around these routes, evenings, weekends, any days off. So, David, how long typically are you told it takes to do the knowledge so that you pass the exam and get your license?
Well, you're not told. That when I started the knowledge, you hadn't got a clue where you were. But now there is a grading system. So you've got a bit of an idea how you're doing. So there are certain hurdles you have to pass before you can move on to the next one. The exams are spaced apart. So when you first start, the exams are 56 days apart. Prior to that, you've done a couple of other little things, like you've got a blank map and you've got to identify roads and so on. But once you're actually on the knowledge properly, you have these appearances which start at 56 days. And once you've proved that you're good enough, you're then put on to 28 days. So then they're spaced 28 days apart. Then they go to 21 days and 14 and so on. So that's really how the exams are undertaken. And you've got an idea how you're doing by obviously the frequency of the exams. So that's the start of it. And then what you do is that you go out and you learn all those runs. And every day you sit down in your spare time and you start learning those runs parrot fashion. What you're trying to achieve is that you can recite parrot fashion all those runs without having to think too much. So say, for instance, run 1, page 1 is Manor House Station to Gibson Square. So Manor House Station, you'd say, leave on left Green Lanes, right Highbury New Park, left Highbury Grove, right St Paul's Road, compare Highbury Corner, leave by Upper Street, right Barnsbury Street, left Milner Place, forward Milner Square, Gibson Square facing. That's the one everyone knows, everyone remembers, because it's the number 1. So you only have another 300 or 400 more of those to learn. So once you learn those parrot fashion, then you're going on then looking for points. And the points can be anything which the examiners have gone out themselves and found. So you'll never, ever be asked to run. Never. So forget about actually knowing where Manor House Station is. You're going to be asked a small hotel around the corner. So you've got to try to find that hotel, remember it. And if you are arbitrarily asked that, then you can show to the examiner that you know where that point is and you know how to get from that point to the second point, which is at the other end of the run. So you could have some pretty unremarkable hotel near Manor House Station, and you could have something like the Point de la Tour restaurant near Gibson Square. And then you'd have to show the examiner that you know what roads they're on. And you'd have to show that you understand one-way systems, so you're not going down a one-way system the wrong way, and you're also pulling away at the right side of the road. So if you've got a dual carriageway, you've also got to explain how you turn yourself round to go in the right direction. And it's as easy as that, really.
Easy is not one of the words I would use. You just said. So you are having to work through these different levels, and as you go up through the levels, the time period between each appearance is getting shorter and shorter. So the pressure is more and more as you go through the different levels.
Yes.
London is a huge place. It's changing day by day. There's roadworks, there's diversions. And obviously you don't know when somebody comes to your cab, you have no idea where they're going to want to go. So you have got to, right, where does this person want to go? And straight away, okay, I'm here. I need to get there. Right, I need to turn round here, or I need to turn left here. And you've got to recite that, which is completely different to
Yes.
behind the wheel of the cab and going, okay, I know where to go. But to actually recite it in front of the examiner, it's just remarkable.
Yes. Because really, when you think about it, if you're a cab driver, you're not going to get prior knowledge. You're not going to have a booking. Most aren't bookings. So you're going to just pick someone up. I always say, if you pick someone up outside one of the clubs in Pall Mall and they want, say, Victoria Station, they do that run. Those people coming out of that club will go to the station every night of the week. And all they'll say is, take me to the Shakespeare, or take me to the Hole in the Wall, Victoria. So you haven't even been told virtually Victoria Station. You've just been told a small place around Victoria Station where the gentleman likes to be dropped off. And you're not going to have time to stick that information into some kind of sat-nav. You're just going to have to drive off, and that's it. So you can understand why the exam concentrates on these arbitrary places and trying to explain within a minute or so how to get from one to the other. So, and as you say, at the same time, you're also going to work. Nearly all of us, it takes so long. You can take you 5 years. So it took me 4 years, 10 months and 13 days to be precise. But, you'll be a very lucky person if you could stay off work for that length of time. So most of us have got work at the same time as well. So you're going out in the evenings, weekends, looking for these points, and then all your spare time, you're then trying to recite these runs so you don't have to think about them when you're actually being examined. Eventually, you get to the stage where not much else goes through your brain.
Because you are the one doing the knowledge, and as you say, most people are probably holding down a full-time job as well. But it's also the impact on your family life, because as you say, every spare minute is spent on doing the knowledge, and it's not just for 6 months, it's not just for a year. Presumably it's up to you how quickly you go through the levels, but there's got to be a certain point where, you are looking at, as you say, 3 years plus. That's a huge commitment for you as the London Cabbie in your future, plus your family.
Yes, you have to have a very understanding wife. I mean, when I finished, I took her for tea at the Ritz. And I knew where it was then. So I took a tea at the Ritz, and we had afternoon tea, which I can thoroughly recommend. If you want to do something rather special, I can thoroughly recommend that. But that's where I took her afterwards, because, as you say, it's a long commitment. And towards the end, you don't think of anything else. You think of, say, if you were doing a master's at university, you're doing it properly. I doubt you're thinking of much else as you're writing up your dissertation and so on. And the knowledge is the same. One of the men who ran the schools used to say, if you're thinking of anything else, you're not doing the knowledge properly, because that's exactly, it just fills your brain with information, and that information never stops, because the examiners are going out every day and they're looking for new points, and they're going out and seeing if you have found that point as well. So it's an ongoing thing all the time. When you say about roadworks and so on, you actually have to call it as if the roadworks aren't there. So you're having to assume all the time that the roads are open. There is no problems. So that's another problem as well, because if you're there and you can't explore that area because of roadworks or whatever, you've got to try to work out what to do there. So that's another complication.
David, let's talk now about you taking the exams. Do you have memories? Does it make you tense up, feeling the stress you must have gone through?
Yes, well, we haven't discussed the exams. Now, I'm going back my time. They have, in this new world of everyone being a little bit kinder to each other, they have changed their stance a bit. But in my day, the exams were really two parts. The first part was what we've just discussed, and the second part was to explore your temperament. All the examiners in my day were policemen, ex-policemen. So they knew a thing or two about human nature, and they would push you all the time. So they would try to mildly intimidate you. They would talk very softly. As you're walking down the corridor towards their office, they would just close the door in your face. They would put the chair in the office at the other end of the room and then talk very softly, so you had a job understanding what they were saying. When I had one, the worst examiner was a man called John Ormes, and his knowledge of London was truly phenomenal, but he did like to intimidate his candidates. And I was in there once, and he asked me for 2 points in Adam Street, and they were opposite each other. And I thought about it for a while, and then I said, "I'm sorry, sir, but I think they're in the same street." He said, "Yes." He said, "It's raining, I'm pregnant, and I've got a wooden leg." So he's saying you never turn a job down, but you've got to know where you're going. So if a woman did turn up and she literally wanted to go 5 yards up the road, then you jolly well take her there. So and there was things like that all the time. They would try to make you worried, and particularly Mr. Ormes was the one to fear. He had a parrot in his office, a child's toy parrot, and the consensus at the time was if the parrot was staring out the window, he was in a good mood. But if the parrot was facing you as you walked in the room, that he wasn't in a good mood and you're in for a bad time. So there's all these very small things. And of course, you can understand why, because they don't want people who are going to react. Once you're out in a cab at night on your own, you've got to handle situations. And anyone who's handled the public knows there are some pretty strange characters around. So you've got to be of the type that you're not going to get worked up too much. You're not going to assault your passenger, and you're going to be able to handle the situation. So if you could get through the knowledge, and Mr. Orme, you can certainly get through a Saturday night down in London at the West End.
So David, let's talk about you taking the final exam. So you've gone through all the levels, you've done all the hard work. Today is the day.
No, you get there. It hasn't quite finished there. So we've got now down to 21 days, and then you're down to 14. You're almost going all the time then. And then miraculously, he stands up and he shakes your hand and he says, "Well done, you've passed the knowledge," but you haven't quite passed the knowledge, because you then got the suburbs. So then you have to go out, way out of London, to places like Ascot Racing, Epsom, Heathrow, or the airport, that sort of thing. And you have to learn all those runs as well. But you don't have to describe it exactly, but you have to be able to demonstrate you know the way from Terminal 3 into somewhere else, around the area. So that's more perfunctory, really. But there's still a lot of travel with that one. You have to undergo another medical to make sure you're still okay. You haven't suddenly suffered any illness in the meantime. And you also have to take a driving test, which is a little bit more advanced than your average driving test. Show that you can handle a wheelchair, hill start, and generally understand. And you have to do a 3-point turn in an incredibly narrow road. When I did it, I couldn't believe what my instructor was telling me that I had to do. It was a road no more than 15 foot across, and I had to do a 3-point turn in that without turning the wheels when the cab isn't moving. The cab had to be moving all the time. So then once you passed your test with that one, nowadays they have a small presentation. In my day, you just turned up again and you just sat down and you waited for your bill and badge. Our license of bill, and it's actually short for bill of health in the days of the plague. So that's what your bill of health is. But you have a small badge, and a green badge, and you also have this license. And that was the end of it for us. Nowadays, they make a little bit more of it. You have a small ceremony, very similar to if you graduate, and you're invited to come up with your family, take a few photographs, and that's the end of it. And off you go. And you can start straight away, of course. As soon as you've passed, there's nothing to stop you just going up to the nearest cab garage, and you present. Your license comes in 2 halves. You present one half, and they keep that as a identification that who's taken the cab, and out you go. It's all done on trust after that.
So with the cab then, David, do people generally own their cab? Do they rent them or lease them?
In my day, I would say over 50% owned their cabs, and then the other half probably would. You can rent. In those days, you had loads of old cabs, and you could rent cabs at any quality you liked. So when you first start, you obviously rent the cheapest, oldest cab you can, because you are going to have the odd prang and so on. And once you've got a bit of experience, you might go out and buy one. Nowadays, the cabs are very, very much more expensive. And my understanding is that they take out leases of 3 years at a time, because at over £60,000, they're unlikely to have that sort of money nowadays. So that's what they do.
Wow. So David, we've talked about your journey with completing the knowledge. So with your job, you have no idea who is going to get into your cab. I'm sure you've got a few stories of some characters that you've picked up along the way. So we can not mention names. We'll protect the innocent.
I've got to be careful. Now, I can tell you a few well-known names. Now, I've had Grayson Perry, the transvestite potter, dressed as Little Bo Peep or one, well, something like that. Very nice gentleman. So he was in my cab. I've had the late actor John Hurt been in my cab, and Bill Nye. Most women would know the actor Bill Nye. He's a frequent user of cabs. And Jeremy Clarkson I've had twice, and I've had Boris Becker, the tennis player of 20 years ago. I was on the radio circuit, so there is a number of ways that you can get fares. Obviously, you can hail a cab. We're the only vehicle allowed to actually accept a hail from the street, or you can have bookings, either pre-booked or it comes through on a small device we've got in the cab, if you want to subscribe to that. And one night, a really awful night, it was snowing, and I took a call for a job to take Bill Nye, pick him up at Notting Hill Gate and take him to his flat. And I slowed down at a set of traffic lights, and I had forgotten to turn my for hire light off. So there I'm sitting at the lights, snow coming down and the light's still on, and who turns up looking very cold and very miserable was Jeremy Clarkson. And I had to turn Jeremy Clarkson down for Bill Nye. So I drove up to Notting Hill, which was only a few hundred yards away, actually. And I picked Bill up and I told him that story I've just said. And he thought that was very funny, because if you think of two people who probably are more diverse in their views in life, is these two. So he laughed all the way back to his flat, actually. He rather enjoyed that one. Yeah.
I was going to say, I should imagine you're probably a confidant, you're probably a agony aunt to all different people. Some people just get in your cab and take me from here to there and they don't even speak. Others will want to tell you about the dreadful day they've had or the argument they had with their loved one before they left home this morning. I'm sure you get it all.
Oh, we had a few of those, yes. Women are a typical one. I'm sorry to be too sexist, but their boyfriends have just given them up and they're sobbing in the back. That's one. And I had a very curious conversation once. I picked up a couple of girls and took them no more than half a mile up the road, and they were saying, "Oh, it's really cold tonight." And so, "Yeah, it is. Yeah." So we've been standing around the street corner. I'm really frozen now, and the work's dried up. And I thought, really? Yeah, I really don't want to carry on with this conversation. Thank you very much.
You have no idea when you go to do your shift who or what will happen. I mean, it's just, life is a box of chocolates, isn't it?
It is. You don't know how much you're going to earn. You don't know how far you're going to drive. And, I mean, I've sent a picture back of Brighton Pier to my wife and said, "Wish you were here." The trains had gone down and there was a whole convoy of us, cabs all going down the A23, taking people home. Ended up on the beach at Brighton at 1 o'clock in the morning. Another time, it was a Saturday night. I'd just finished my lunch, and I was driving around Victoria, and two men hailed me, and they'd been to a football match. And after the football match, they've gone for a meal and so on. And they've gone back to the train station to find there were no trains. They'd closed up the line for the rest of the night. I suppose maintenance or something. So they've gone round to the coach station where the buses were running a shuttle service. And they were to find that there was no buses for 2 hours or more. And they had to get back to Bristol. One of the guys, or if maybe both of them, they owned this wine bar in Bristol. So they had to get back to Bristol to close up the wine bar. So I ended up with a job all the way to Bristol one night. And when I got there, I got hailed by a youngster who was with his girlfriend, but I didn't pick up that. I wasn't licensed, but we drove all the way to Bristol that night. So as you say, you can never tell.
David, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, because this is the second time we've done this recording because the quality was bad before. David, it's been absolutely fascinating learning about the knowledge, learning about your experience and some of the characters you've picked up. David, what should I have asked you? Is there a question I should have asked you before we finish the podcast?
Yes, how to get a free ride in a cab.
Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah. How can I get a free ride in a cab? Tell me.
Well, if you're really lucky and you catch one of the probably 6 or 8 people a week which actually pass the knowledge, tradition has it, for luck, you give your first ride for free. So with luck, you might have, thousands of cabs out there and millions of hails. You might just be lucky. The guy said, you know what? You were my first job and I'm going to give you this one for free. And when I had it, my first job, I'd been driving around for a couple of hours without any works whatsoever, probably missed most of the hands jumping up. And it was a nurse, and I picked her up at Bart's and she was going to Moorfields. And we had this conversation. When I got there, I said, well, what did you think? Did I go the right way? And she said, well, you weren't bad. I thought, well, thanks very much. Obviously, I didn't go the way that all the other cab drivers went at the time. So there you go. There's your free ride.
That's a brilliant story to end the podcast. So, David, thank you so much for being so patient in doing the second recording. And thank you for telling us so much about the knowledge. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Sheila.
I hope you have enjoyed the conversation. Don't forget, if you have a story you would like to tell, please get in touch. My email address is allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com, and thank you for listening.